Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. 5 most important breakout players for this Oregon Ducks program heading into 2024. And Dill, and this is no secret. We've talked a lot about this Oregon program. We've talked a lot about the reasons we think this Oregon team is one of the most dangerous teams in the country heading into the fall. And a lot of our conversation regards around the star players, right? The Dylan Gabriels, the Tez Johnsons. This is my favorite episode, because we kind of get to talk about our guys that you don't really hear a lot about in the national media. But if you ask yourself the question, if Oregon reaches their potential in 2024, these 5 players are probably breaking out for this Oregon Ducks program. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Oregon Duck fans. Been a blast talking this program. You guys continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, left out a lot of breakout candidates from this list. Would love to hear some of your input in the comment section. And Dill, without further ado, let's get into this one. Now, this was your nomination, a linebacker, Justin Jacobs. I personally think you're being a little hard on Justin Jacobs. That being said, I kind of understand why you call him a breakout player. Played really solid football when he got healthy for Oregon in 2023. But I think we both feel as if you're looking at a linebacker that can probably emerge as one of the best linebackers in the country in 2024.
And I think that's it. Oregon doesn't have a ton of breakout players, because, like, to say that, that'd be like, well,
they return pretty much everybody.
That's the problem. It's like, I'm looking like this is just a loaded team. So it's like, are you going to say someone like Connor Lee's a breakout guy? I don't know. He was really good last year. Justin Jacobs was good when he was on the field for sure. But there were some really frustrating moments, I felt like, in that Pac-12 championship game where, again, you need run stops and you're not getting them. I just think there's a next gear for him to get to, because you look at the talent. I mean, to be that tall, that athletic, and take blocks on, I just think you want to see him playing a little bit faster, being able to reach the perimeter, just do things a little faster, a little bit more in tune. And you have a really, really great linebacker, let's say, not just good.
Yeah, I look at Justin Jacobs and say, you're 6'4", you're almost 250, you go sideline to sideline. Like, the physical traits are as if he's the best linebacker or could be the best linebacker in the country. You kind of want to see him put it together. And I think you made a really good point in the biggest moments. Like, a lot of these breakout players were solid for Oregon last year. Those big games and the big moments, that's when you need these guys to kind of step up. Going to our next player, and a guy that we've been increasingly banging the table for. And, like, as we've gone back into the 2023 film, as we watched that spring game, we've spent a lot of time talking about Oregon on the defensive line and kind of asking that question, do they have a national championship caliber defensive line? And if a guy like Tatum Tuioti kind of takes that step going into year 2, and again, a guy that kind of flies under the radar, because you have Mateo Yu, you have Blake Purchase, 2 guys that certainly could fall under this category as well. I look at Tatum Tuioti and say I would put him into that kind of tier, and just another one of those names that could emerge as an all-conference, all-American caliber player for this Oregon Ducks program in 2024.
You kind of said it. I mean, you have 3 guys on that edge spot that you think can really emerge. If I'm picking the 3, I think it's going to be Tuioti, just because the way I watch him, I think a far more developed pass rusher at the end of the day. Yeah. And again, if Mateo Yu and Blake Purchase kind of put that together in the way he's started to at a more advanced stage at this point, I mean, those 2 are super talented, so they might be able to break out above him. But I just look, the way he chains his pass rush moves together, just the way he plays fundamentally sound, and I think is a better athlete than people kind of perceive or give him credit for. So again, I think he's going to be the guy this year for them. I think he's really good.
Dill, I was doing some reading in Tatum. This kid has a 78-inch wingspan. Like, there are some physical traits that you can get to work with a guy like Tatum. Again, kind of flies under the radar because you have some flashier names in that edge rusher group. But I think this kid really could emerge as the best edge rusher for this Oregon program. And I think circling back to answering the question in terms of most important breakout players, Tatum, Mateo Yu, Blake Purchase are probably those 3 players that if Oregon goes out and wins a national championship, you're probably getting all conference play from at least one of those players. Tatum certainly could be one of those guys. Going to our number 3 player, and another really good football player that played good football last year, in the wide receiver room, Trayshawn Holden. Dill, this kid is kind of a matchup nightmare. You look at Dillon Gabriel and how he wants to work the middle of the field, 6'3", 220 for Trayshawn Holden. He commands that middle of the field exceptionally well as a pass catcher. You could go a ton of different directions in the wide receiver room. I know some Oregon fans are going to be dropping Jurion Dickey in the comments section. I certainly am all aboard the Jurion Dickey train heading into 2024 as well. This wide receiver room has not only guys that you know what they are, Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart. You got some guys like Trayshawn Holden that I think is itching to have an 1,000-yard year. And then you guys got like Jurion Dickey as well. A lot of candidates in this wide receiver room that could be breakout players in 2024.
And one thing I think you especially look for from Holden is you saw a couple of those moments where after the catch, just really, really dynamic. You see in that Pac-12 title game, like, again, when he got his shots, I thought he was really good last year. Obviously a very crowded room. But again, you kind of look at what Dillon Gabriel, when he's on his game, it's getting the ball out quickly, and it's not necessarily throwing it down the field a ton, but just having the timing, letting your wide receivers make plays. That's why you look at him, Trayshawn Holden, and even Evan Stewart. I think people think Evan Stewart, maybe think more of a deep ball like route runner guy. But again, when he's got the ball in his hands, he's pure electricity. So you got three guys who, again, I think really favor what Dillon Gabriel wants to do, because he does do a good job of diagnosing plays and getting the ball to where it's supposed to be and letting guys go to work.
I'll say this, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, and I'm kind of stretching the definition of a breakout player. I would throw in Evan Stewart in terms of breakout player, and that has a lot more to do with, yes, he's been a very good wide receiver. His first 2 years at Texas A&M, was a true freshman All-American in 2022. There's some room for him to take that step. I think you could be looking at, and again, a lot of the conversation goes to Tez Johnson, who is an exceptional wide receiver in and of itself. You can't really put him in the breakout category because he broke out last year. Dude, I look at Evan Stewart and say, I think he could emerge as one of, if not the best wide receiver in the country. And again, he's played some really good football. I think there's a step for him to take in an offense that is finally going to fit his game. I mean, he was kind of just rotting away with Texas A&M, bad quarterback play, bad offensive coordinators. I'm fired up for Evan Stewart as well in that wide receiver room. Let's go to the offensive line, where you just don't have many question marks about this group. Like, you look at a Johnny Cornelius and Josh Connerly Jr. For my money, maybe outside of LSU, the best offensive tackle duo that you see in the country. You look on the inside, you're bringing Matthew Bedford, just a load of experience. I think the only guy that is not really an unknown, because we saw plenty of him in 2023, but a guy that if he kind of puts it together going into year two, emerges as that really, really solid center. You're looking at an elite offensive line, Del Poncho. I think this is another big-time storyline and a candidate to certainly break out in 2024.
In another guy, I almost think you're right. Like, it's tough to call breakout because you almost, when he was on the field last year, of course he wasn't going to play over Ben Powers-Johnson. Ben Powers-Johnson's a legit NFL center. But when he was on the field, he was dominant. He was moving guys off the ball, and that's a big thing. I think, again, when you think Oregon, you were thinking a little bit more of that high-fluting pass game. But really set everything up was their ability to run the ball really, really effectively. I think they got 5 offensive linemen, all 5 you're really comfortable with, playing an ultra-physical brand of football, getting guys off the line of scrimmage. And then you look at who the running backs are, you're really comfortable with them being able to run the ball physically as well.
Yeah, I'll throw in Jay Harris to the breakout play. We don't have him on the list, but he's another guy. I wanted to put him on. My brother vetoed me. Also, messing up Powers Johnson's name. I hope the Oregon fans give you some heat in the comment section for that. Let's go to number 5, and that is Amari Washington. Now, we're fired up about what Dan Lanning did on the inside of the defensive line. We started going into the offseason saying we want Oregon to have difference makers on the inside of the defensive line, right? Not knocks on guys like Popo or Casey Rogers, but not difference makers, not national championship caliber defensive linemen. You're bringing Derek Harmon. You're bringing Jamari Caldwell. We certainly know what those two guys are going to be, but you also look at another quality of national championship caliber defensive linemen. It's not only about your starting 4. It's about what you have in the 2 and 3 deep. And Amari Washington, I think a lot of Oregon fans, quite frankly, would have been comfortable with him being kind of slotted in as a starter heading into 2024. Now you're talking about him being as a rotational piece, but a guy that I mean, when you're given big Jamari Caldwell or Derek Carmen blow, you can put in Amari Washington and he can be an absolute handful for opposing interior offensive linemen going into year two. Just like we talked about Blake Purchase, Mateo Yu, and Tatum, he certainly could be a guy that is a difference maker for Oregon on the defensive line.
Because you just saw the flashes of him playing more physically. I mean, when he put his hands on offensive linemen, I just feel like you saw kind of the jolt, the snap that you would have wanted to see from Georgia defensive linemen or the Bama guys. Like the guys you kind of look at like, oh, these are big time defensive linemen. You're right. They were solid in the middle last year. But the problem is you can't be just solid when you want to go win national championships. Yeah. Again, Oregon's at that point where if they don't win the conference and win the national championship, arguably, that's a bit of a bust of a season. I think that's just where they put themselves. So again, when we're talking at the margins, you need your interior defensive linemen to just be better in the big games and be tougher and be more physical and just be dominant rather than just
especially going into the Big Ten. And you look at it, we say this all the time. You look at the last couple national champions, Michigan, 3 guys in the inside that are NFL draft picks, maybe even 4. You look at Georgia the last couple of years, multiple NFL draft picks on the inside. The defensive line is where it starts. That's what Dan Lanning kind of been building up to. Guys like Amari Washington, like stepping up and being, again, depth pieces, but guys that can be difference makers. That's a massive storyline. And again, if you were
we'll see. I loved Derek Harmon. He's no doubt going to be the guy, I think, for that defensive line. I don't know that Amari Washington can't very much push Jamari Caldwell for at least the joint startings. I think Amari Washington.
Well, but that's okay. I think that's fair because you look at the defensive line. You go back at Michigan's last year, like Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Chris Jenkins. It doesn't matter who's starting because they're all playing a lot of football. Like when you're talking about the defensive line, it is not necessarily you got one starter, the other guy's not playing. Like you're rotating those big dogs consistently. So I don't really give a darn if Amari Washington or Jamari Caldwell is getting the start, quote unquote, because they're both going to play a lot of football. I think.
Well, I'm just saying more because I agree with you. You essentially have 4 starting defensive linemen. If you don't have 2 rows, 2 battalions, if you will, to throw at guys, then you might as well just not be one of those elite teams. So yeah, I just think wouldn't be surprised if Amari Washington, we're talking about him as second best.
100%. That's why we're talking about him as a breakout player. And I mean, you look at it, if you were to ask me, Oregon wins the national championship in 7 months, and then you ask me to predict who are the guys that broke out. If Oregon wins the national championship, I am fully on board with the breakout players being along the defensive line, right? The Mateo Yus, the Blake Purchases, the Amari Washingtons. Y'all know we're fired up. We got a lot more Oregon Ducks football to talk about over the next couple of months heading into 2024. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, let us know in the comment section some players you guys have as your breakout candidates. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.